Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of DePodcastry. I'm actually recording this right after I recorded episode 1, so if my voice sounds tired and it sounds like it's getting a little gravelly, well, it's just because I'm happy to see you. That doesn't make any sense. Welcome. So, in this video, as I said in episode 1, this is going to be a more freeform commentary and analysis of Dark Souls 1 and 2. That we're going to talk about today. I'm just going to chill with you guys, talk about the games, give you my general basic thoughts on them, and hopefully you'll enjoy it. I will take note that I'm not going to go in depth with any bosses or areas too much in this because I have already covered those wholeheartedly on the channel, so I don't want to spend too much time talking about that. You know on the whole that I like the bosses in the game very much, though it does have its duds. And, well, I guess we're talking about Dark Souls 2. Now, I'm not going to shit on Dark Souls 2. I've got some interesting things to say about Dark Souls 2 today. But, yeah, you get the idea. So let's just go into it. I did structure these as love-hate videos originally, so my notes are based around love and hate items. So I'm just going to talk off of those points. So my first and number one love of the original Dark Souls is world design. And I feel like you cannot talk about the OG Dark Souls without talking about world design because the shortcuts, the interconnectivity, the world building, everything about it is just phenomenal. It is so well done. It is frankly one of the best open worlds ever designed in a game. It just blows me away. I guess in some way, it's not open world in the same way as a sandbox concept. This is kind of how I think about the game. I think about it kind of like a spiderweb. Many of today's open world games are built around that whole sandbox idea. The sand is malleable and it can have dunes rising up or sinkholes cascading downward, but ultimately a sandbox is flat, it's horizontal. Whereas Dark Souls is built like a spiderweb. Sure, you look at it from one angle and it appears to be flat, either vertically or horizontally, but as you inspect it further, you realize how much it branches both vertically and horizontally, building off those connections to create something really vibrant and alive. Something that is a true marvel in world design that few games have ever been able to match. I didn't really think about the verticality until one of my Twitch subscribers, Gold Ardeo, yes, I am friends with the golden helmet from Bloodborne. Until he mentioned it to me, I think he said it was from Matthew Matos's review of Dark Souls, that the game is very vertical. I remember moments like being in the Tomb of Giants and looking down and seeing the Lost Izalith. Like, how could you not? Because the Tomb of Giants is so fucking dark. But I said I wasn't going to talk about the areas, so we're not doing that. But it's wild. And then I remember other moments where you could actually like see your blood stain from a different area in the game, like way far below you because of the different views you have. I think the way they did it is just so good. And it sets such a high standard that it really made the second and third game in the Dark Souls saga really pale in comparison in this area, which is a shame because it's so well done here. And the other thing I have to praise about it is when you have a world design like this, when you have a world that is so free, open, truly, it can be very easy to get lost when it's not linear. Dark Souls is not a linear game. You have many different paths that you can take. Sure, it's like having a set amount of doors in front of you. There's not an unlimited amount or anything, but my number two love about the game is that it gives you a natural direction. I'm someone who gets lost in games so easily. You may as well call me geographically challenged. Yeah. Never put me in front of a map. Never tell me to get you anywhere. I rely heavily on a GPS. But this game has a way of giving you nonverbal direction. Sure, there's verbal direction, like how you'll talk to Oscar in the beginning of the game, and he'll tell you, you're the chosen undead, you need to go blah, 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 get out of the asylum, and that tells you to get out of the asylum, and then you'll talk to the crestfallen knight, and he'll tell you, you need to ring the 2 bells of awakening, one's in the depths below, and one's in the, undead parish above. So, you do get verbal direction, but even though they're telling you to go to those places, you don't necessarily know where to go. Well, for example, in Firelink Shrine, if you go down toward the skeletons, you might think, oh, I'll go in this graveyard. There's this cool little graveyard area here. That's pretty easy to get to. That must be where I need to go. No, you get your butt rocked by some of those skellies and absolutely get obliterated, which tells you, oh, maybe I shouldn't go in this direction. This is something I feel like is overlooked in games a lot because me talking to you right now, as you're listening to my voice, you have no idea what I'm doing. I could be waving my hands in the air. I could be sitting here in the nude. That's weird, DeMod. But you wouldn't know. You wouldn't know what I'm doing. The point I'm trying to make is that a lot of communication is based on body language. I have a minor in psychology, which clearly means that I'm a professional. And I read lots of research studies where they talked about how important body language is in our communication. Well, body language doesn't really happen in games. Mostly they rely on telling you what to do. But nonverbal communication comes from things like this. It comes from going in an area like the graveyard and getting your ass beaten and telling you instinctively, oh crap, maybe since I'm doing such little damage, I know the game's hard, but it's not that hard. I mean, you can go that way if you want to. Like, if you want to be a badass, you can, and we'll get to things like that later. But I do like that it directs you in that way. I think that's very good. Now, something to talk about big time in this game that kind of goes in with that a little bit is bonfire scarcity. In this game, compared to the other games, there is a perfect, I would say, maybe sometimes a little bit too far, maybe sometimes a little bit too close, but for the most part, I don't think they've ever gotten it better in the 3 Dark Souls games than they did in Dark Souls 1. The bonfires are perfectly placed apart where you have a dilemma where you say to yourself, do I want to try to go to the next bonfire and risk my souls, or do I want to go back to the previous bonfire and respawn all the enemies and then try it over again and see if I can do better this time? I really like that dilemma, and I feel like the later games don't have that dilemma as much because they placed a lot of bonfires throughout. Now, in hindsight, some of that is nice because you get to fast travel really easily to all these different bonfires, and that ends up being kind of nice later, but that also ruins some of the world exploration, which could be seen as its own problem. But I don't want to talk too much about the other games yet. I'll leave those for their own segments. But I do really feel that the bonfire scarcity was very well done and made the world feel even more desolate. It really set the stage and made you have a dilemma every time you wanted to move on. And it made it really painful when you lost your souls because you may have chosen and said, hey, I think I can make this. And then when you died, you felt so frustrated at yourself for not making the decision to go back, play it safe, spend your souls, and level up. And I like that. But that is because my love number 4 is that game knowledge is a reward. Now, there's 2 big reasons for this. Souls is all about learning from your mistake. That's the reward in death. Knowledge. You get some knowledge. And I talked a lot about this in my 10 Things About Dead Cells video. I talked about how each death teaches you something. That's something that is a hallmark of Souls to me. The game is most of the time fair. Sure, there's moments that aren't as fair. There's jump moments and stuff in the games, but those are few and far between for the most part, especially in Dark Souls 1. For the most part, Dark Souls 1 is not very cheap and focuses very much on you overcoming a challenge, and if you can't overcome it and die, you have to think about why you died. Did I roll at the wrong time? Did I roll in the wrong direction? Did I attack at the wrong time? Any simple thing like that can really be thought about to say, and the next time you see that attack, the next time you see that enemy sling that cleaver to the right, maybe you'll roll left, something along those lines. And when you play the game again, what I was talking about with going to the catacombs, maybe the first time going to the catacombs would be an impossible feat for you. The second time, you may actually find yourself easily being able to go to the catacombs just because you know how to handle enemy engagements better after playing the game, which is very, very nice. And that also goes into, if you know the world in its infinitely awesome design, you can take huge advantage of it. The biggest way I can think about this is sometimes you just want to fap, man. Sometimes you just want to get your fap on. And the game tells you, no, you're going to have to wait until the middle of the game when Goldilocks invades Anor Londo to get your fap ring. Hell no. What you do is after you kill the gargoyles, you go there and you Sparta kick that bitch off the cliff. And you take the fap ring for yourself. All you gotta do is kick him off the cliff and then reload the game. He'll never aggro to you. And then you can fap as early as you want to and as often as you want to. And maybe that'll help with the bonfire scarcity a little bit. You get to fap all day, every day, bro. But if there's one ring that I want more than the fap ring, it's the freaking Darkwood Grain Ring. The DWGR should stand for Darkwood Grain Ring was great, really, because I freaking love doing ninja flips. If you want me to tell you my biggest complaint right off the bat, skip the next segment of the video, skip when I talk about Dark Souls 3. Let me tell you my biggest complaint right now. The biggest thing I hate is that I can't ninja flip. I want to be able to ninja flip in those games, and they took away that ability. Fuck you, FromSoft. Why? I hate it. I don't know why I like it so much. I don't even know. Doesn't it actually like give you an extra couple iframes or make your roll animation faster? I don't know. It's just badass. I just like being able to flip. I love it. It's great. So I guess that's all I really have to say about that. But what I do not like, hate it. I've already talked about 5 things I like, so we're on a roll. But the first thing I hate, I cannot stand the limited roll functionality in this game. If I were to go through my videos and look for the top 10 most commented DeMod comments ever, I guarantee you in the top 5 has got to be, bruh, if you would just lock on your fucking camera, maybe you wouldn't suck so much dick at this game. Understand that this isn't my first rodeo. I've played these games quite a bit. I'm very aware that if you press in that little R3 trigger on your DualShock 4 or whatever you're playing on, that you will lock on to the enemies. I know this. But when I played Dark Souls 2 and Dark Souls 3 for the footage, for those boss videos all that time ago, I had just played Dark Souls 1. And in Dark Souls 1, sometimes it is good to lock on, don't get me wrong. Sometimes it's not, like against pretty much every single fucking boss in the game. And you know why? Because when you're locked on, you can only roll in 4 directions, which is garbage. Because I'm so used to being able to roll omnidirectionally that I will try to roll forward to the right, and it will end up getting me killed because instead, I'll just roll right into the boss and get absolutely slammed and killed. So I'm pretty good at controlling the camera. Just because you're not good at controlling the camera doesn't mean that I can't do it. Now, granted, there are some times where I should have used it in Dark Souls 3 in my boss ranking video, which I hate that video is my most viewed video, and that was from footage from the first time I had ever played the game. Guys, I speedrun the game later. I got better, I promise. Except at Princes, I never got better at Princes, and yes, locking on helps for the Princes. Sometimes. We're not talking about Dark Souls 3 right now. What we will talk about is love number 6, combat fluidity improvements. Actually, is that 6 or... No, it's 6. We can count, guys. Math is hard. Combat fluidity improvements. Now, here I don't actually have that much to say. When it comes to Demon Souls, the combat was solid. It was a really cool combat system, but it was clunky for sure. Dark Souls is also a bit clunky, especially if you were to play online. The lag in the online games is just disgusting. But it's certainly an improvement. It feels more polished. Your hits register more often. There's some less questionable hitboxes. It's not as stiff and it looks better in motion. That's really all there is to say about it, other than I'm glad that that's how it is. I don't think they should have changed it in any dramatic way. The combat in Demon Souls was phenomenal. It just needed some polishing, so I'm glad that they polished it. Now, since we're talking about what Dark Souls does better than Demon Souls, let's talk about some things that are improved. Definitely love number 7, the opening cutscene. Don't get me wrong, I do like the opening cutscene in Demon Souls. I think the opening cutscene in Demon Souls is very well done, but the one in Dark Souls is just so good. It's so good. It sets the stage so well for the rest of the game. It gives you this real sense of purpose that's much greater than time to slay demons, my boy. We got soul arts for you. Like, okay, cool. But not. Don't get me wrong. Not that that was a bad intro. Just all the lords fighting the dragons, the pygmy, all this shit. I mean, I'm not a lore guy, so I probably said something wrong even just in my little summation there. So I'm going to stop, but I do like the opening cutscene. What else I love is the tutorial. Now, that might seem like a moot kind of like random thing to bring up, but I have to say, I think the tutorial in Dark Souls is one of the best tutorials of all time in a game. And the reason I feel this way is because it has everything I expect out of a tutorial. It's not overly challenging on the whole. Most of the enemies pose absolutely no threat to you, and they give you a chance to learn the combat, learn the controls. They have an intuitive way of telling you how to use the controls and set up obstacles to help you get over them. Like when you go through the hallway after the Asylum Demon drops, they have a tooltip that tells you can hold up your shield and block the arrows from the guy. For example, I'm pretty sure that's a message there. I'm pretty sure I didn't just dream that up. Maybe I did. Maybe they tell you to roll. Who knows? They give you an absolutely perfect amount of obstacles. They give you unlimited attempts because of the bonfire. You're really not getting any souls from these enemies, and you can't level up yet anyway, so you're not losing anything. It doesn't feel frustrating, unless you're just one of those people who gets angry at every single game you play for no reason. Then you probably shouldn't be playing Dark Souls. But I like how they did that because it gives you a fair opportunity to learn the mechanics before you leave. And the catch there is you can't leave until you've learned the mechanics well enough to overcome a decent challenge. Now, for those of us who've played Souls to any kind of greater extent, obviously the Asylum Demon is a joke. It's a very, very easy boss. But the first time you play the game, go watch any, like, I'm playing Dark Souls blind on Twitch, or go watch a video on YouTube. I'm sure you've seen those kind of things before. People are horrible at it. They're horrible. And I was too the first time when I played Demon Souls. Like, I wasn't very good at it. I don't know if the Asylum Demon ever killed me the first time I played. Maybe he did. I don't know. He probably sat on my ass. Didn't know how to smack that booty yet, apparently. But I really, really like it because it teaches you that this game is going to force you to overcome challenges. And that's what Dark Souls is all about. It's every bit of that in a nutshell. And the tutorial I also like because it's not too long. It is actually just as long as it takes you to accomplish it. You can go in and complete that tutorial in a matter of less than 5 minutes, or if you need to really get your skills up, it'll keep you there for an hour or more. Who knows? I just feel like the pacing's perfect, the setting is perfect, having the crow come and grab you at the end is really neat. Oscar is a nice touch, the cutscene, it leads into it, it teaches you everything. It's just great. It's really, really great. But my favorite thing that Dark Souls improves, far and away, even though I just absolutely praise that tutorial to high heaven, the healing economy is by far the biggest improvement, by leagues and leaps and bounds. It's so much of an improvement. Because if you play Demon Souls, you are slinging goddamn herb all over the place. You have so much grass in your goddamn pockets, it's absurd. Because it's just so easy to get. It's so easy to farm all the grasses and stuff. And that's not to say you have to. You don't have to farm all the grasses. You could easily just not do it. But it's honestly, it's not even like you have to farm them. Most of my playthroughs in that game, you kind of just get them naturally because World 1 gives you so many. Anyway, the point is, when you play Demon Souls and you have these grasses, right? It is a limited quantity of healing, only limited by your desire to farm. But the big catch with it is, if you have a decent amount of them, as long as you win every enemy engagement, you have downtime, naturally. And in that downtime, you can fully heal yourself. Now, in Dark Souls, that is not the case. Anytime you set out in an area in Dark Souls, you leave a bonfire, and you have a limited amount of healing to get to the next bonfire. So that comes in with the bonfire scarcity. That gives you a place where you have to decide, do I want to risk my souls? Can I make it to the next bonfire? If it's your first time playing, you might not know where the next bonfire is. You also have to decide if you want to go back and refresh it over again. Sure, you can get your healing back and you'll have a place to spend your souls, but all the enemies are going to come back. So the game essentially says, this is your amount of healing for this area, and you have to figure out how to overcome this area with this amount of healing. You can't go make the game easier for yourself. Now, on the other hand, you could say that that's a benefit of Demon Souls. If you want to make Demon Souls easier for yourself, you can. You have that option, but Dark Souls actually has a clever way of doing that as well. There is another form of healing. There's humanity. Now, humanity would be more appropriate to say than just a healing item. It's a resource, because humanity can be used for one full heal, but humanity can also be used to restore your humanity as a hollow, which will allow you to summon. But the trade-off comes that if you can summon people, you can also be invaded. So it's like this perfect balance of pain and pleasure, and it's this devilish thing that goes in with the bonfire scarcity perfectly and just really, really nails it. Really, really nails it. Oh, and I forgot, you can kindle bonfires too, of course, and get more healing, but only for that bonfire. So you have to choose, is this area the hard one that I want to spend my hard-earned humanity on? It's great. Great, great, great. Cannot praise the healing economy enough. And this healing economy clearly has an impact on the rest of the series, so Dark Souls really nailed that. I would say the healing economy in this game is probably the thing that should be praised right up there with the world design. Now, when it comes to something I hate, let's go back. We've been talking about a lot of things I love. Let's talk about some things I hate, and specifically something that didn't improve enough from Demon Souls, in my opinion. It did improve, but it didn't improve enough, is the Titanite system. I talked a lot in the Demon Souls video about how I hated all the stones. I made jokes about stones, and yeah, I don't like it. There's too many different stones. It's too confusing to me. It's something, I hate when you have to look up a guide. Like, of course you don't have to, but it'll save you a lot of frickin' headache and... what's that? I was going to say geology. Is that stones? I don't fucking know. Anyway, the Titanite system is better because primarily you upgrade most things with Titanite, special Titanite as Twinkling Titanite or Demon Titanite, and, you know, whatever variations there are if I'm forgetting anything. Which is nice that you can upgrade most things with the same item, but it was kind of that way in Demon Souls too. Like the Hardstone, Sharpstone were what would upgrade most things, and then you had variations that would augment them later. And it's the same way in this game. They just replace stones with other colors of Titanite. There's green Titanite, there's yellow Titanite, there's red Titanite, purple Titanite. I don't actually think that one's real. I can't remember, to be honest, because I never fucked with it. I never fucked with it because it was annoying to me. I didn't want to go farm other kinds of Titanite. I always use the same thing. I always use the Claymore and Quelaag's Fury Sword because I like doing the Fury Sword flip, and the Claymore just slays some bitches and hoes, you know? So it was like one step forward, but one step in the same ass place. They kind of improved it a little, but they still kept it mostly the same. So I wish they had made a bigger leap there, but you can't have it all, can you? And when I say that, it's because you can't have the perfect game. Of course you can. There's no such thing as a perfect game. There may be a game that's perfect for you, objectively, but there's no such thing as a perfect game. And when it comes to what I hate most about Dark Souls, and of course hate is a strong word, but when it comes to what I hate most about Dark Souls, and I don't think many people disagree, it's the inconsistent quality. I would say that the first half of Dark Souls might be the best first half of any game. I mean, there's plenty of games out there that I love. And for me, it's probably not, but I think it's a very flawlessly paced arc that leads up to your conclusion with you as the chosen undead fighting Ornstein and Smough, which is why so many people remember that. It's like, it really is, to me, the peak of the game. The problem is there's still half of a game left to go. And I'm not trying to say the rest of the game is some utter trash heap in comparison to the other. It's just wildly inconsistent. The bosses and areas are much weaker overall, and the experience begin to wear thin in terms of clever design. And I don't even need to go into the Demon Ruins, Lost Isolate. That stuff is trash. We all know it's trash. So I don't want to make it out to sound like the whole second game is part of the game is garbage, but I'm not a fan of the Catacombs. I don't like Pinwheel. I don't like Nito. I like Nito's design. I don't like him as a boss, really. The Lost Isolith and Demon Ruins speak for themselves. Trash bosses, trash area. I never really liked the Four Kings. I think it's a DPS test. I hate New Londo. When I think of the second half of the game, the only thing that ever stands out to me really harshly is that's likely when you're doing the DLC, and obviously the DLC in this game is really good. And Gwyn is a great fight. Gwyn is a very climactic moment of the game. That's the only time the game starts to rise back up toward that peak for me with Ornstein and Smough. A lot of people talk all the time about a remake of Dark Souls 1. And if they ever were to do that, like remaster, I guess, I would actually like to see them fix the Lost Isolith, like really do what they wanted to do with it. I'd like to see them add multi-directional rolling, add infusion and stuff, the improvements that would make it better. Definitely something that I think would be worthwhile. Give me a moment to sip my tea here. So I'm just going to talk about a couple more things that I love. I'll talk about the soundtrack. I've been asked many a times to talk about the soundtrack in these games. I've been asked to make DeMod make a top 10 Souls tracks list, and I did it. I did it. If you watch my Q&A, I did a short little top 10. Why haven't you watched my Q&A, man? If you like my channel, I made that Q&A just for you. I put a beautiful face with Maria touching me on it. It's sweet, hot and sultry. I tried to mix those words together. They sot. That's not a word. Anyway, the sound, not the sot, the soundtrack is great. Love it. Some of the tracks in the game, like Gwyn's, Artorias, Ornstein and Smough, Sif, the list goes on and on. I could name more than half of the tracks and say they're all like knockout, identifiable tracks. Demon Souls had some pretty good tracks, but other than maybe Maiden Astraea's and the Tower Knight, there was none that really made me like jump and like, oh yeah, I want to go listen to those. Well, Dark Souls is different. Dark Souls has some tracks that really, really stand out. And I think they make a big difference in Dark Souls 3. I like Soul of Cinder as a boss, and I know I said I want to talk about bosses or Dark Souls 3, but I think the throwback in that fight to the music cue is really a big part of what makes the second phase of that fight so memorable and so emotional. And that's all thanks to how good the soundtrack was in this game. I would be remiss if I talked about Dark Souls and what I love about it if I didn't mention one grossly incandescent fellow. Now, I can make all the jokes in the world about this, but the simple truth is that Solaire is a shining beacon of friendship in a dark, unforgiving world. I think that's why he stands out so much to the player. He really gives you a warm and fuzzy feeling in a place that has none to offer. When I played the game, I looked up to Solaire in a way because of it, and maybe even admired him. And it gave me a good chuckle when I found out that he admired me all the same in that funny scene in Anne Orlando when he giggles about your affections for him. No matter what challenges you fought through, he was a step ahead of you all the way until his tragic end. And there's just something memorable. There's something about him that sticks with you. I know some people don't like Solaire specifically because of how rabid the fan base got about him. But people are memers. People are schemers. People like to just jump on the bandwagon, and there's a reason the bandwagon started. Let's put it that way. He's very good. And the final thing that I'm going to talk about that I love about Dark Souls, and I said I wouldn't do it, but I'm good doing it. Artorias and his tragic tale and excellent fight. I can't. I'll avoid talking about the bosses as much as possible. When it comes to Artorias, sure, I love Ornstein and Smo, but I do have a couple problems with their fight. But Artorias is just so good. It's just such a good fight. And there's something that really, really gnaws at me about seeing such a heroic figure that's been talked about the entire game fall to madness right in front of you. And there's this like instinctual feeling like where you really get immersed in the game as a warrior and feel like so sad to see someone you might have even looked up to fall in this manner and not want to fight him. And yet at the same time, you know everything he fought for, and it makes you feel even more motivated to take him down because you don't want to see this tragic hero be dishonored like this. The music is perfect. The fight is perfect. It's so memorable. And going back and seeing Siren, I think her name is, like weeping over his grave. That's a lot of people talk highly about that DLC, and I like Calamite and Man is fine, but Artorias really is what makes that DLC, and that's why it's called Artorias of the Abyss, and he really is the absolute highlight of the original Dark Souls for me. So now we're going to move on to Dark Souls 2. I would say that overall I really do like the original Dark Souls. It just has a couple problems with the inconsistent quality and a couple nitpicks like the Titanite and the rolling stuff. Things that are fixed later in the series. The inconsistent quality is really the only thing. So if they ever did go back and remake the game, I would love to see them remake the inconsistent quality, make the second half of the game better, and add those quality of life updates. It really would make it more of a masterpiece than it already is. But it's a fantastic game. It truly is. And if you're somehow listening to this on my channel and you've never played the original Dark Souls, find a way to do it because it's still worth it today. Let's move on to a game that's not worth playing. I'm just kidding. I have to say, when it comes to Dark Souls 2, I have definitely had my strong, if you'll call it, opinions against Dark Souls 2 on this channel. And mind you, one of these things that's difficult and why I'm so excited about doing these podcasts is because I only have my limited scripts that I talk to you guys in. So I only have, these 10 or 15 minute frames where I'm talking to you guys about this stuff. So you only get snapshots into my opinion on something. And for humor, I may go to hyperbole. I may exaggerate how I feel about something just to make it an entertaining video. That's why I want these things to be more laid back where I can talk to you guys more seriously. Like, sure, I'm a silly guy. I'll probably make dumb jokes that might make you laugh, might make you cringe. Who knows? But I'll be more serious in the way that I talk about the games that I'm talking about or the topics that I'm talking about here at times. And I want to explain my experience with Dark Souls 2. I played Scholar of the First Sin, and I really don't like Scholar of the First Sin. I honestly think Scholar of the First Sin is far and away the worst of the 6 games. And the reason I say 6 is because recently I was thinking about speedrunning Dark Souls 2. I say recently, it was a couple months ago, but I was thinking about speedrunning it. And Cheesecake and Jay Snuffy, 2 of my subscribers on Twitch, were kind enough to buy it for me because I really didn't want to double dip. I felt like I didn't like Scholar of the First Sin. I didn't think I was going to like the other version because I didn't think it'd be that different. And I was like, I don't want to waste my money. Well, fortunately, they took care of me, and I'm very grateful for that. And I have to say, the vanilla version of Dark Souls 2 is completely different to me than Scholar. The enemy placements in Scholar are so much worse. The changes they made in Scholar are so much worse. They made that game a horrible experience for me that gave me an awful first impression of this game. Don't get me wrong, I don't love Dark Souls 2 as much as the other games, but after playing the vanilla Dark Souls 2, I can understand why people like Dark Souls 2. Because even in Scholar, I could see the things that I loved, which I'll talk about shortly, that shine through in this game. And Scholar just really ruined that for me. Fortunately, I'm not a grudge holder type of person, and I was able to really enjoy the vanilla Dark Souls 2. I think people can go back and vouch that I truly did have a good time playing that game when I played it on stream. So I'm very happy I had that experience, because I feel like I just forever would have felt way more negative about the game than was necessary. So let's talk about some things I actually love and hate other than just the vanilla versus Scholar. First of all, I like that the game is in 60 frames. It's the first one that was actually in 60 frames. I know some people don't care about frame rate, but I have to say that Dark Souls, with it being a very combat-oriented game, is something that feels better in 60 frames. It feels more fluid and in motion. It kind of felt weird at first. I have to say, when I switched from playing the original Dark Souls to playing Dark Souls 2, but then it just felt natural after a bit. So it's a small little buff, but, give it to Dark Souls 2. It was the first one to have 60 frames, and I suppose unless you use DS Fix, it's one of only two, because Dark Souls 3 is the only other one that can run at 60 frames, and that's only on PC, I believe. Build variety mechanics. I'll be honest in saying that I want to be not objective. It's impossible for anybody to be objective. We're all influenced by our biases. I don't really care about build variety. I don't. I typically find a weapon I like and stick with it. That's just the kind of person I am, because my emphasis, as I've said before, is on the combat and the bosses in this series. I don't care that much about making builds. I don't care about PvP. I don't really like that. So it's not important to me, but that doesn't mean I can't acknowledge when something's done well. And undoubtedly, the build variety is so well done in Dark Souls 2. There's so many options that even someone who's not that interested in it kind of had fun toying around with how you would build your character. I can see where people are at least coming from. And the mechanics, I think, in this game are the best so far. Yes, there are some problems that I will get to, but the mechanics did get a polished update in terms of combat with power stancing and all those things that I didn't even know what power stancing was, honestly, until someone told me what it was. That's how much of a basic bitch I am when I play these games. But I have to give it up to it. But when we talk about it, the mechanics, there's two things that bother me. One, far and away the worst, obviously, is the shitboxes. This game has the worst hitboxes in the series. Now, I want to make it clear that the entire series has hitbox problems. It's not only Dark Souls 2 that has hitbox problems. Dark Souls 2 just has the worst of them, and they're the most prevalent, which makes it stick out the most in my mind. So this is the time where I chose to talk about it. But I mean, Bloodborne, I love, has shitty hitboxes. Dark Souls 3, love, has shitty hitboxes. They all have problems, but Dark Souls 2s are just far and away the worst. And the second thing that really pisses me off is the turnstile enemies. I call them turnstile turtles because those things turn... It's like they're on a swivel. It's like they're on... Well, what moves in a circle and spins? Like a record? Like it's like they're on a record player and they're just like spinning on top of it. It looks absurd. And I get that in an ideal world, if they wanted enemies to be able to track you like that, to make it so you couldn't backstab fish them or whatever, they would have an animation where they kind of move quickly on their feet. But even then, I'm typically not one to get into this kind of stuff. I suspend my disbelief in games, but if you're telling me this big, fat, motherfucking turtle can spin around that fast while holding a mace over his head while tracking you and getting ready to slam it, then, my friend, you've never taken a physics course before. I can't stand it. It's not just the turtles. There's bosses that do it too. There's other enemies that do it too. It's very, very frustrating as a player. And the reason it's frustrating me is because I'm not a backstab fisher. Strafing is just something you use in any combat game. So it pisses me off. But the biggest reason I think the shitboxes are bad in this game, like, it's not perfect when you have this problem solved, but why? Why did you turn iframes? Invincibility frames, for those who don't know, are the frames that allow you during a roll to dodge an attack. They tied them to a stat. They tied them to adaptability. The only justification I can see is that maybe you could say in some realm, it forces you to choose another thing. It forces you to choose between damage, health, and having the ability to dodge effectively. But I just think it's so frustrating. It really just was dumb. It was unnecessary. Fortunately, they never did it again, but they should have just patched ADP out of the game. I'm not even going to lie. They should have just patched ADP out of the game and given you Dark Souls 1 iframes. Because I think you need something like 26 ADP to have the agility to have Dark Souls iframes. I just can't stand it. It made my Soul Level 1 run of this game incredibly frustrating because it wasn't about the damage. My damage was actually okay, but ADP just... Oh my god, I think I fought Fume Knight like 200 times in my Soul Level 1 run. It was something absurd. Until I finally learned that I could iframe through some of this stuff. But yeah, I had to get a ring for it and everything. It's just fuck ADP. Alright, fuck ADP. Now, when I talk about bosses, one thing that always frustrates me in the Souls games is not having a boss rush mode. Because I want to replay the bosses without having to go into New Game Plus to replay the game. And even though I don't really want to have to fight a boss in New Game Plus, I do have to praise the game for having Bonfire Estics, not only because it allows you to refight the bosses, but it allows for some very interesting pathing through the game where you can farm souls from bosses in higher levels and stuff. The any percent run that I attempted and never really got good at because I just didn't like the run too much, but I did like the beginning. It was a 5 rotten run. You would kill the rotten 5 times using Bonfire Estics to get 1,000,000 souls. That way you could go through the Shrine of Winter early in the any percent. And I thought that was pretty cool. I thought that was a pretty cool idea, and like I said, being able to fight the bosses again and get New Game Plus items in your New Game playthrough if you want to is pretty cool. It's pretty cool. I have to praise, going back to the Titanite system, they improved the weapon upgrade system. They improved it so fucking much because they added infusion. They added infusion stones. It just made it so much more simple. You didn't have to get different kinds of Titanite. You just infused it. It was that kind of weapon. God bless infusion. Like, I don't think there's anything else I need to say. They finally fixed because I talked about it enough about what I hated about it, and they fixed it completely. The problem was completely alleviated in this game. Yeah, it's still a little complicated getting all the different types of things you use to upgrade weapons, but it's far and away so much better in this game, so God bless Dark Souls 2 for fixing that problem. Let's see, what else do we want to talk about here? PvP. I've said that I don't like PvP. I don't care for it in this game. For me, the Souls games are all about single-player PvE experiences. I don't like co-op in the game either. I feel like these games were designed to be played single-player, and I feel like the PvP is kind of tacked on and crappy. It's just my opinion. That's completely subjective. I know some people swear by the PvP of this game, and if that's you, then don't let me take that away from you, by all means. Now, I will admit, though, that I tried the PvP of the game, and I actually found it to be very, very enjoyable. I still think it's fun. It's not something I'd want to spend my free time doing, but just to test it out so I could talk about it for that well-loved best PvP in the Souls series video that I made, where I say Bloodborne has the best PvP, and I stand by that. Come at me, suckers. It's good. It's good. It's fun. But Soul Memory blows. Soul Memory is stupid. I understand why they did it. They wanted it so people could twink and try to go and fight people at low levels with high level gear, but it just wasn't the right way to go about it. It's not the right way to go about it. I won't harp on it because Soul Memory has been talked about so much. You all know what's wrong with it. It gives you, instead of having your level be the determining factor in matchmaking, it's determined by how much souls you've gained throughout an entire playthrough. So, but if you don't know that, it could end up screwing you. It's just bad. It's just dumb. Let's see. I like the freedom of exploration in this game. That's another thing that I love. A lot of people say that this game is way more linear compared to the other Dark Souls, and I don't feel like that's entirely the case. It's probably a bit more linear, but I feel like this game has a lot of different paths you can take. I can't think of them off the top of my head because I just kind of maybe blocked Dark Souls 2 out of my mind. I'm kidding. I don't hate it that much. I like the game, okay? I like it. I like Dark Souls 2. There, quote it. But, I mean, even in the beginning of the game, you can go to the Forest of Fallen Giants, you can go to Hyde's Tower of Flame. Like, no, there's not tons of different ways to go, and it's not paced as well, but it's still enjoyable. It's still enjoyable. Let's see. But it comes down to, I guess, quality over quantity. Really? They really... Wait, did I say quality over quantity? Oh, okay, sorry. I have this written down in my notes is that I hate that they don't do quality over quantity, but this game has, for bosses, areas, everything, again, I don't need to go into those too deeply, but I think it can be agreed that this game could have done by cutting the fat and making the existing components better. Because there's some really great stuff in Dark Souls 2, but there's also some really shitty stuff in Dark Souls 2. And I'm gonna go real controversial here. I'm gonna go real controversial here and tell you something that I don't like about Dark Souls 2 after playing vanilla Dark Souls 2. You know what I think's the best part about Dark Souls 2? The base game. You know what I think's the worst part about Dark Souls 2? The DLC. I fucking hate the DLC. The only thing I like about the DLC are some of the bosses in it. I think the DLC is utter garbage compared to the rest of the game. And I know that's going to be controversial because I know it's talked like, oh, well, vanilla Dark Souls 2 was kind of crappy, but the DLC was really great. You know why I don't like the DLCs? For as beautiful as the areas in the DLCs are, they are filled with the same plague of enemies that's in Scholar of the First Sin. There's so many spammy enemies that have tons of poise. There's too many of them. They are around corners, hiding like little assholes. They are so annoying. And at the end of the day, you want to have fun playing a game, right? If you're getting annoyed playing a game because it feels like the game is just throwing too much crap at you and it feels unfair, frustrating, whatever, you know, maybe you think I need to get good. Maybe you think I'm complaining. I am, and probably do need to get good. But I have to say, when I played the DLC in my Soul Level 1 run, I still had the damage, but I had such struggles getting through those areas. And granted, yeah, it was a Soul Level 1 playthrough, so obviously I was going to have some struggles, but the DLC just had so many spammy and frustrating enemies. Biggest pain in the ass. But the bosses are great, of course. There's some great DLC bosses, so I have to thank it for that. But the areas and enemies, go fuck yourself on that one. Not you, the game. Not you. If you like it, that's fine. I respect other opinions. I think it comes down to their design philosophy when it comes to this quality over quantity, and maybe why they changed Scholar. I think their design philosophy really was hard is better than good. At the end of the day, if we can choose anything, we have to make our game hard. If that means sacrificing the quality of the game, then so be it. As long as our game is difficult, that's all that matters, because that's what people liked about Dark Souls 1, right? Well, yeah, we like the difficulty, but we like the difficulty or what's the right way to say? We like the difficulty when it was complemented by fair design. And there's times in this game where it's not as if it just doesn't feel fair. It feels like there wasn't a lot of thought put into it. Like, there's moments in the game where you'll go into rooms where they just, like, chucked 8 enemies in a room. And it's like, what the fuck is this? This is just, like, an open room with 8 enemies. What is this? Like, did you really just make, like, a square of a room and toss 8 enemies in it and say, fuck, go for it, son? I don't know. It's frustrating. And I guess you could say that the single encounter difficulty is made up by the excessive healing in this game and bonfires, like life gems. As much as I praise the healing system in the first game, I have to go back and retract myself, because in this game, they went back on the Estus. They didn't give you as much Estus in the beginning of the game, but they gave you this nice fucking candy that you could buy an unlimited amount of. And sure, it's not like the grass in that it heals instantly, but it heals over time, which arguably is better to some extent, because you can pop a bunch of them and keep them active when you're taking like damage over time. And I don't know what they were thinking. Life gems are just not a good idea. They had the healing system perfectly done in Dark Souls 1. Granted, this is a bit of a different game, so because their design philosophy complemented such a hard game, I guess it did need more healing. But Dark Souls 1 was hard too, man, and you just had to overcome it. So I don't really know why they changed it. This is going to be a very stupid complaint and a very minor complaint, but I cannot stand the look of hollowing in this game. I'm fine with what they did with it. I'm fine that they kind of took it back to a Demon Souls style where you lose health. I'm fine with that shit. But oh my god, why do you instantly look like a zombie? It's disgusting. Like, none of the hollows were meant to look good. I'm not saying like, ooh, look at my crispy beef jerky over here. What a hot stud. No, I'm not doing that. But at the same time, he didn't look disgusting. Like, I could look at him and not feel like I want to vomit or hurl. Like, it's just awful. He looks like he's rotting. It's like rotted flesh. It's disgusting. And maybe that's realistic to the lore. Again, not a lore buff, but it looks gross. And I don't want to look at it while I'm playing the game. So it's very upsetting. I guess really, this is something I'm going to talk about in Dark Souls 3. Some too. But and this also, other than the DLC, could be my biggest, most controversial complaint of the game, because I don't think I've ever said this on YouTube before. I know I've said it quite a few times on stream. I think that Dark Souls 2 and Dark Souls 3 would be better if they didn't exist. And the reason I say that is because I feel like they did not strengthen the story of Dark Souls. I feel like they diluted it. Yes, they did give more lore. Yes, they did give more expansion to the universe. But ultimately, I think the reason that Dark Souls 2 and 3 were made was because of money. Does that mean they're bad games? No. Do I regret playing these games? No. Am I happy they do exist in lieu of something else? Yes. But if I could have something else, would I want it? Also, yes. In my mind, I wish that FromSoft had created 2 new IPs with the formula like they did with Bloodborne. I'm not a huge sequel guy unless it's necessary, and I felt like the open-ended ending of Dark Souls was really nice. I felt like the world was complemented well. I didn't think it needed this cycle of fire thing, and maybe that's because I'm not a lore guy. Maybe there was a lot of stuff in Dark Souls 1 that suggested it needed expanded lore, but from everything I know about Dark Souls 2, the lore was initially all over the place, and people really didn't like it at first. I didn't play Dark Souls 2 until way later down the line in like 2016, so I don't know for sure. But I just don't feel like these games were necessary, and I feel like they added worse features to Dark Souls. Dark Souls will always be the better game of the 3 just because these games didn't try to do anything else. They just tried to be a sequel to Dark Souls. One of the things I love so much about Bloodborne is while it keeps many of the mainstays of the series, it has its own identity. It has its own setting, it has its own lore, it has its own combat style, it has a transformation weapons. Like we'll talk about Bloodborne sometime for sure, and I will absolutely blow my load all over that game because we all know I love Bloodborne. But I just really don't think these games were necessary, and I wish they had taken the assets that it took to make these games and make something else. But this is the same thing I've talked about time and time again in other videos. We do just really live in a day and age where things move so quickly. It's easier to market something that is an existing property than it is to try to create some totally new IP. But I think the success of Bloodborne shows that FromSoft can make a new IP and have it garner the same success as any of the other Souls games. And I think the fact that we're looking at games like Code Vein, Neo, and things like that, and slapping the Souls-like title on them, and like also blowing our load on those games before they even come out, trying to mark them as some new Souls successor, shows the fact that we are hungry for new Souls-like games. So I want to see them make new IPs. I think that they will in the future. I don't think that we'll see a Dark Souls 4, but I really just do think it was an unnecessary sequel. So, like I said, am I happy it exists in lieu of something else? Absolutely. Do I wish that I got something else instead? Also, absolutely. But when it comes down to it, the last thing I can love and appreciate about Dark Souls 2 is that it tried to do something unique to some extent, for better or worse, with its different systems, with its different style, different world. They clearly tried to make it into something different than Dark Souls. They tried. So I have to give credit where credit is due. I'm not trying to say it was just a complete cash grab and they didn't put any effort in. I'm just saying I don't think their efforts were put in the right place. They were so hard-pressed on that whole hard is better than anything else mentality that I just feel like it made a subpar product. I feel like if they could have just had the freedom to make it another IP, it would have been fine. But at this point, I'm rambling. I want to give props to Dark Souls 2 for what it is. I do enjoy it for what it is. I do think it's a quality game. Do I think it's on par with the rest of the series? Not really, but I gotta say, I'll leave it at this. I'm gonna tell you when I finish talking about Dark Souls 3 and Bloodborne, my ranking of the games, my arbitrary ranking of how I see the games, and I will tell you, after playing vanilla Dark Souls 2, it is not my least favorite game in the series. If we're not counting Scholar, it is a different game. Scholar is far and away my least favorite game in the series, but it is not. Dark Souls 2 is not my least favorite game in the series. It is not, but I will leave you guys with that. I hope you enjoyed hearing me ramble on about what I love and hate about Dark Souls 2. I hope that these style of videos isn't too much lower quality than what you come to expect from me. I feel like the majority of people that come to my channel, at least from my perspective, and maybe once I post these videos, I'll find out that that's a different story. I feel like people come to hear me talk about games. You just like hearing me talk about games, and then I like hearing you guys in the comments get to talk about the games yourself. That's kind of what I've always valued about this community, and that's what I like to see. But maybe you guys like the meme jokes and stuff like that, maybe you're going to miss them. If you do miss them, I'm still going to be making the same style of videos that I've made before in the 10 Things series, and I hope you guys look forward to that. I'm going to be doing Destiny 2 very soon, unless I, for some reason, post this video way later than I expect. Clearly, guys, as I've said, I'm organized as hell. If you listen to DePodcastry 1, I'm organized as hell. But I'm also as grateful as hell for you guys for listening to this video. Thank you guys for watching. I love you very much, and I will see you in the next video.